Welcome, one and all, to the Ferret and Raccoon podcast, episode 198. I am technically your one and only host for this podcast, bringing you the second podcast of August 2022. And a few things I've got to quickly address before we really get into things. This podcast may sound different over the course of its duration. That's because I actually have a pre-recorded discussion I did with Ace, good buddy of the podcast and good friend of mine. So you may hear inconsistencies. And yeah, it's quite early in the morning and there are a lot of cars. And the problem with what's happening right now in this country and kind of around the world is that it's really hot. England is once again back in a heat wave, and it's been happening over the last week or so. And yeah, it's been quite difficult to, I guess, find not necessarily the time, but find moments or spots where I really want to work in this heat. It's even pretty difficult to even just play games given how hot it is. And you may hear, like I said, the constant noise. That's my laptop. Because it's so warm where I am and I can't find anywhere cool to record, it's going to be making noise, and it's honestly on its last leg. So I'm really sorry for any audio hissing or whatever, or constant noise. I'm sorry about that. It's just the conditions in which this country is in, which is quite unfortunate. But yeah, by the time this podcast is out, hopefully the rain will come. But yeah, it's been a crazy couple of 2 weeks around the world in entertainment, which we're kind of going to talk about a little bit later on. But what I've been up to is I've been trying to just ignore it for the most part. I'm off of work, and I don't get a lot of time off of work very often. And usually when I do get that time off of work, it's usually spent getting work done. But I've managed to actually play a brand new game that came out this year, being Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge, which is honestly a fantastic game. It's a short one, and it's honestly brilliant in a lot of ways. It feels like a love letter in so many great ways, which I won't say, and it's just old school beat 'em up goodness, and it's just a ton of fun. I think I've beaten it about 4 or 5 times now, and I do intend to platinum it. It does have a decent level of challenge, and it is a great sense of replayability, as they've done a lot of really unique and smart things in terms of having a old school beat 'em up in the modern day age, in terms of having collectibles and other challenges, and just some nice quality of life stuff that have been implemented as opposed to the previous games within the, I guess, TMNT beat 'em up franchise, or beat 'em ups in general. The game comes from Tribute, who did a fantastic job with this game, as the animations are just buttery smooth and just amazing to look at. And what did they also do as well? They did Streets of Rage 4. So yeah, they're definitely hopefully going to put their name more on the map as time goes on, especially with those 2 releases. The other thing I did was I finally got around to watching 2011's Rango, which was an animated film produced. I can't remember the studio's name, but I know not Disney, excuse me. Nickelodeon also produced it as well, which is funny because both of those games were kind of funded and produced by Nickelodeon, which is kind of cool, because Nickelodeon currently owns the rights to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So that's cool. But yeah, Rango was really good. I actually really liked it. There were a few things that I'm surprised they didn't show. I'm not sure if that was just like a budgetary thing, or they just didn't think that was important to show, which I feel probably could have added a little bit more to the film, but I actually really liked it. One of my favorite aspects of that film is just how realistic and odd and kind of dirty all the characters look. It does feel kind of anti-Disney and anti-generic in a lot of ways, because unfortunately a lot of Disney's animated pictures do have the formula. They unfortunately kind of have that pseudo Cal Arts look, which is basically the bean mouth, if you want to call it. If you just type that up, the Cal Art style, you know what I mean. Lots of animated series have that, because most of the people who went into animations and made animations around the I guess the end of the last decade and the 2010s kind of went to Cal Arts, and that's kind of how they got into it. But that's something we can talk about and reference somewhere else down the line. But yeah, it was a really good film. I actually really liked it. I'm really annoyed that I slept on it for so long. I definitely want to get it on Blu-ray, because yeah, that was a quality film. But I only have 2 trailers to actually talk about, because there just wasn't really much, given that I think what we're going to talk about in the discussion kind of took over the internet to some extent. But the first trailer we're going to talk about is weirdly going to be Cars on the Road. Now, this is an odd one for me to talk about because I hate the Cars films. With the exception to the beginning and the ending of the first film, which I think are legitimately really well done sequences, and they're the only parts of the film I actually ever want to watch. So why am I talking about this mini-series? Because, I don't particularly like Lightning McQueen or Mater, but to be honest, this series looks decent in some regards. It's There's some kind of creativity, or there's some level of creativity, and there's some fun ideas that I think are actually quite interesting in this series, as it seems like the series is going to be expanding on the very confusing world by admittedly adding more confusion to the world. For example, there are ghost cars, apparently. Like, how exactly does that work? Although I'm guessing that it's going to be revealed that this is a haunted house and that it's like all fake to some extent. It kind of seems like that because the cars are kind of that generic green glow and they're kind of going, ooh, we're ghosts. So I'm guessing that's going to happen. But we have a Mad Max like cult in the Cars world, which I think is a really cute idea, especially seeing a Disney product essentially reference the Mad Max series. And it is cool to see other things in their world that would make total sense, like monster trucks and such. That's really cool. I think someone is clearly having some fun with the series. Maybe they're kind of poking fun at how nonsensical the series does make sense. It's just kind of like, rolling with it to some extent. And I kind of hope this series turns out to be a lot of fun. I might actually give it a watch, even if it's just for that Mad Max episode, because, they kind of seem to put a lot of effort into that one in terms of like the lighting and the aesthetical style. So very few people could have actually been able to really do it justice. I know Rick and Morty did a great episode on that, which was pretty cool as well. But the next trailer I want to talk about, or the last one, I guess, more accurately, is going to be for Alone in the Dark, which I believe this is going to be a 2023 game, which was a big surprise, as I was not expecting to see one of the originators of survival horror return for a new game. But annoyingly, they've chosen to call this game Alone in the Dark, meaning that in the franchise, there are now 3 games called Alone in the Dark. The 1992 one, which kind of served as inspiration for Resident Evil and Silent Hill, and the 2008 game that killed the franchise, basically. And that's not even mentioning Alone in the Dark Illumination, which, in my opinion, might be one of the worst games ever made. But I digress. But this game, I'm actually digging for the most part. The cinematic in the beginning, sets the tone perfectly, is what horror story isn't complete without a creepy child doing creepy things or, whatever. And that girl honestly does remind me of Laura from Silent Hill 2. Even that one scene in the trailer where she's just sitting there kicking her legs, talking to the main protagonist, is something that Laura or a child who knows more than they're letting on to would do, which I think it's a good thing, which, because this game is clearly taking a lot of inspiration from Silent Hill, whereas once again, Alone in the Dark was partly an inspiration for Silent Hill, that and Resident Evil and Kindergarten Cop. And so it makes sense that the game would have that kind of vibe, and it kind of does feel like they kind of do know what they're doing, especially where I believe the writer or one of the writers from Soma, which is another great game, is working on this, which is very reassuring because, yeah, Soma's a good game, like I said. So it is very promising, and I am liking the South New Orleans setting as a big house, or the big houses they have, I should say more accurately. It's a fresh and interesting take on the mansion, as I also get Resident Evil 7 vibes, which I believe that game was set somewhere in the South as well, which once again is not a bad thing to take inspiration from, because that was a really good game that did a lot of great things for the industry and survival horror as it is, whether you like to admit it or not. It is cool that you're going to be exploring outside the mansion, and some of the designs inside are twisted in the right way. It does feel like it does have, going back to the Spencer mansion with just odd and questionable things, and given that there seems to be some level of sanity, which is accurate for the franchise, it was the one thing that kind of sets it apart from Silent Hill and Resident Evil. It is interesting. I do want to see things being corrupted and messed up and not really knowing what's real and what's really going on. The combat, though, is kind of hit or miss for me. Granted, we don't see much, but I hope that it's either good, or that there are alternatives to gunplay, just running away, or maybe melee that kind of pushes the monsters back really quick. But so far the game does look pretty strong. It looks quite fun, and I'm actually eager to see more. So yeah, it's very promising so far. And yeah, that's pretty much going to wrap up the trailers I have, but I do have a discussion which I recorded a little while ago with good friend Ace. He came back to help me on this discussion as me and him talk about the recent shakeups regarding Warner Brothers Pictures, talking about cancellations, cuts, and the future of Warner Brothers. So I guess I will pass it over to Past Raccoon for that. Thank you, Future Raccoon. And as he said, I am going to be joined by a guest, and my guest is the one and only Ace.
Hello, everyone. I'm back.
It's been a while, and I kind of had to bring you out to talk about, I guess, what could be considered quite a serious matter or a point worth talking about, hence why we are going to discuss this quite briefly, and that is going to be the whole situation with DC / Warner Brothers / HBO Max / Discovery / ATT / a bunch of other stuff regarding this company, this global giant, as I guess they've now become. And yeah, there's been a lot of discussion, a lot of things going on regarding them. And I think one of the main things, or I guess how it kind of all started in some sense, was regarding this Batgirl film.
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah, so I guess long story short, I guess they announced that this Batgirl film, maybe it was nearly finished or in some kind of production, has been cancelled, kind of just out of the blue. And this kind of comes in the wake of them announcing a bunch of changes and things going on with the company. And I guess we're going to kind of talk about these things because it is quite an interesting thing to talk about. But I think the main thing that people are panicking about is this Batgirl film, as well as the Scoob Holiday Haunt, I should say, excuse me, films that were apparently nearly completed and cancelled, which is quite strange for the most part.
Yeah, with the Batgirl film, I believe they announced that it was finished. I think it was maybe just post-production left. So much so, like, the lead actress, she had actually put a picture of herself in the suit on social media for fans, and she quickly had to remove it when it was cancelled.
Yeah, and I'd imagine also because it's technically DC property as well, that photo. Yeah. And I mean, yeah, it's such a bizarre thing to do because in a day and age when they could just profit by finishing it, just releasing it on one of their many streaming platforms and have it be like just content for the sake of content, why would you not do that?
Yeah, there's nothing to lose actually just releasing it.
Especially when you've got an almost finished product.
Exactly. It's honestly one of the stupidest decisions I've heard recently.
It's very bizarre, and it does not help this company in any sense. I mean, because I think people were a little bit too quick to jump on the whole white man trying to stop the woman thing and kind of make this a sort of like social justice thing. I mean, if you go on Twitter, that's what it really is about. Anytime a show gets cancelled and you find out that, you know, the cleaner was a woman, then obviously it's a sexist thing why the show was cancelled. But
I mean, I could understand, like, let's say it is a culture change in the company, like which one's changing, which one's taking over, who's the highest. It's like, well, you know, I don't think this film's going to succeed. You know, you look at all the previous female superhero films, it's like, nah.
Yeah,
don't. But even then, it's finished.
Yeah, it always comes back to just the bizarreness of the situation. And I mean, you know, like the Batgirl TV series wasn't really good. A lot of people don't have anything good to really say about that show. I mean, it had a troubled production. I mean, it didn't review well. I mean, Ruby Rose, who was the first Batgirl in that series, I think for the first 2 seasons.
I think it was just the first season.
It was just the first? I thought it was the second as well. She left the series, presumably, you know, because it was a sinking ship in some regards, maybe.
I think she said it was she couldn't take the online comments.
Okay, that's unfortunate and understandable.
Yeah.
You know, and I think what people do need to realize, I'm not, when I say this, I'm not on DC / Warner Brothers side when I say this, but it may be hard to admit, but in their eyes and in a lot of people's eyes, like, you know, it had a bad reputation. Batgirl was kind of tainted in a lot of regards, so I can kind of understand maybe cancelling it in that right. Not that I think they should have, because like we've already said, you might as well have just finished it.
Exactly.
I mean, going back to the Scoob Holiday Haunt special film, that was almost finished apparently, and that was meant to be like a Christmas thing, and they've just cancelled that.
Yeah, it's absurd because at the moment, like, specials are coming back. We've got several coming, like, from Marvel.
Yes,
So
the Guardians of the Galaxy one as well, and you got like limited smaller series like I Am Groot and a couple other things like that. So yeah, like there's a good point you've mentioned. I mean, you can do that because you kind of have the platform and the freedom to do that. You can experiment. If you want to make some crazy stuff, you can.
Yeah.
Sure, not everyone will watch it, or well, you don't know. That's why you take risks on these kinds of things.
And it tends to be more low-key things that catch everyone off guard anyway. And
Exactly.
That's what they're more likely to talk about, pay to watch, get the merch.
I mean, going back to Guardians, that was a big risk.
Yeah.
You basically made a big budget film with a talking tree and a raccoon in it.
I mean, outside of comic fans, and even a bunch of them didn't even know Guardians.
Yeah,
No one knew what it was.
exactly. Now it's one of the bigger franchises and, in my opinion, one of the best Marvel films.
Yeah.
But I mean, you know, in the grand scheme of things, it was a poor move to cancel that film. I think that's the main takeaway. I mean, it doesn't make anyone look good.
No, it just comes off as completely absurd.
And like in the time when we need more like good, like, you know, good female leading role superhero characters in films in the mainstream, Warner Brothers have kind of shot themselves in the foot and given themselves like a, you know, really bad reputation for not liking women.
Yeah, especially after the disaster of Wonder Woman 84.
Yes, that was not a good film that did not portray women in a very good light. Granted, lots of Marvel films have not portrayed their female characters in great light either, but that is a discussion for another time. But, I mean, the thing that really bothers me is, yeah, the film could have been great, it could have been terrible, but it's the fact that we'll never know and the fact that they never wanted to take that chance or that risk on something that was basically finished.
Yeah.
Which is it's just so bizarre. But I mean, I do think people are blowing it out of proportion to some extent. I mean, given how like awful like entertainment giants have been nowadays, I can kind of understand, you know, when you got like Netflix basically implementing advertisements and cancelling a bunch of animated shows as well, and Disney just doing a whole bunch of stupidness. Like, I mean, the current state of the world, when you take that into effect as well, I can kind of understand why people are freaking out about this, because it is a bit like doom and gloom, or it's the end of
I mean,
Warner Brothers.
There's so much like shit going on anyway. People kind of want the entertainment.
Yes,
so
they want that
relax.
escapism.
Yeah, they
I
kind of need
mean,
it.
if you were a really big fan of like Scooby-Doo or Batgirl, you've probably just been crushed.
Honestly, just the Scooby-Doo stuff has got me so sad. Because what was one of the most recent ones? And it actually had Scarecrow from Batman in it. And that was really good.
Is it one of the straight-to-DVD ones?
I don't know. I think it was an online one. Like, straight to like video online. But it was so good. And it had Elvira in it as well.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
She's appeared in a few others before, I think.
It's honestly excellent.
The Hex Sisters better have been in that one as well.
I can't remember. I think they might have cameoed. But I'm not sure.
I mean, it's always a good Scooby-Doo film when the Hex Sisters
Oh,
are in it. We need to watch some of those as well.
Oh,
especially the WWE ones.
Oh, God. Every time I try and watch one of those with my brother, he ends up falling asleep. So,
Okay,
there's a review.
Yeah, fair enough. Look forward to the extended cut later. One thing I also want to talk about as well, and that's a thing that I think people aren't talking about as much because it's kind of slipped through the cracks, maybe conveniently for WB and DC, is the shakeup regarding HBO Max and this sort of merger with Discovery, and the fact that with this merger and them essentially saying there's going to be some kind of shifting and cuts, whether animation is going to see those cuts. Like, it's not clear and it's not been confirmed. They've been very coy about it regarding some of their comments, especially would come from people like David Zavila. I don't know how you say his second name.
I'm not too sure either.
Essentially saying things like, we will spend significantly more on HBO Max products. In other areas, we'll spend less because we're not finding an efficient return.
Was he also the one that made the comment on the men watch HBO Max, women watch Discovery?
That's a comment no one should make.
Because if it was him, I don't think anyone should listen to him.
Oh, God, that's really bad.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah, and I believe it was something about, men watch like prime time shows and women watch reality stuff. And is one of the most insulting things
That's a
I've read.
generalized stereotype, and that comes across as very sexist. So
Yes.
if it is that person, screw that guy. But
And it just makes you worry about what content they think is going to be viable and who they're supposedly going to market this new streaming platform to.
Yeah, I mean, because comments like that don't even take into account like homosexuality, for example.
Yeah, or like any different genders. Or,
Like, will they freak
non-binary.
out if lots of men start watching reality shows and
Yeah.
women get really into DC?
I mean, like, I love watching Abandoned Engineering.
What is that?
Oh, it's this weird kind of like documentary reality thing where they just go around finding like abandoned like old technology, so like old power plants, stuff like that, and it's really fun. Or
Sounds like
old
some,
ships.
some quality content right
It
there.
is, and you know, I guess because it's kind of a reality thing, you know, makes me a woman now.
I guess, in theory, going by this person's logic. But I mean, yeah, that comment is not very clear. And given that the Scoob Holiday Haunt was cancelled, as well as bizarrely the Little Ellen TV series was cancelled, but then again, we all know why the Ellen show was cancelled. As well as like executives like mentioning terms like course correction measure indicated, which is a bunch of buzzwords and terms corporate speak basically. It doesn't seem like it does seem like their comments might be aimed at animation to some extent when you take into account these cancellations regarding things that people clearly do want. I mean, you've got two animated products cancelled, and you could also bring up the fact that Looney Tunes aren't really doing too much. A lot of their other productions and stuff, you know, animation, not to be nasty to the people who do work on these stuff, but a lot of it is kind of relegated more to straight to DVD stuff. A lot of the Batman, DC film, superhero stuff, straight to DVD. Scooby-Doo film that comes out every year, that's straight to DVD, which is fine. You make your money, people are getting paid, hopefully, and you know, that's fine. But personally, I do think there will be cuts regarding animation at Warner Brothers. The main reason, I believe, is because of what has happened with Netflix.
Oh yeah.
Because a lot of their cuts and a lot of their comments has been in regards to animation and what they believe is profitable animation and what should be cancelled, which is a massive shame. We've lost a lot of great shows and a lot of good talent, which has actually ironically gone over to HBO Max from Netflix.
So I know Netflix cancelled Midnight Gospel recently, which was really sad to hear because it got one season.
It got one season, which I still have not watched, but given that it's coming from the creator of Adventure Time, you'd have to be a fool not to give that man more money. Say what you want about Adventure Time, that show was big.
Oh yeah. One of the most massive ones of like early 2010s.
Yeah, even the creator of Centaur World, that got cancelled as well.
Bloody hell.
I believe she is working for HBO Max now. And I know a couple of others are at Disney and other kinds of stuff, which I'm happy that they have at least found work, and hopefully anyone who has had their show cancelled via Netflix's stupidity hopefully gets work as soon as possible, because clearly Netflix loves to cancel good shows.
Yeah.
And I do think that what they're probably going to do is they're probably going to kind of come at things maybe with that same mentality that Netflix has with this whole, if a show isn't like this, it's not profitable thing. And I think they also might kind of adopt a mindset of children don't watch cartoons, they watch YouTube. How do we tap into that?
Oh no, you're going to get some either absurd, like, do they still do those Elsa, Spider-Man, Joker videos or something for children on YouTube?
Kind of, but I think that's more transformed more into like low budget weird animated things.
Well, now you know what Netflix is looking at.
Probably, because I mean, some of those clips are just so bizarre. I don't know if it was from one of those, if it was like some African animation, but there is a very funny clip where there are a couple funny clips. I know there's one like when I think Venom like stabs Spider-Man in the arse or something. Like, it's just really weird stuff like that.
All right, well, I think I know what I've got to watch later.
I know, and it's just like, it's bizarre, and that's something that I think a lot of people aren't addressing. I mean, granted, hopefully it doesn't happen, because I think the team and some of the more creative people at the DC animation department, I think it's WAG Studio or something like that, WAG, however you say that, they're doing some good stuff. They kind of know their stuff, and even when you want to look at like the Metaverse game that recently came out, there's a lot of love and detail and attention that went into that game. Clearly, enough people who know their animation worked on that game, because there's some great references and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I guess one of the more trickier and more troubling things we've got to talk about, which could spell disaster for the future of DC more accurately, is them opening up this new website.
Oh, yes. It's just called DC.com.
DC, notably without the comics.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess a bit of backstory in terms of how we stand in terms of comics and DC. Personally, I don't really read DC comics, not for any real reason. My shelf literally only contains like one DC paperback, and that is The Killing Joke. I did actually double check, and yeah, there's most of it is like Dark Horse, Indigo, independent stuff. Some Marvel in there, but very specific Marvel stuff, like good Marvel stuff, like Unbeatable Squirrel Girl, like the best Marvel comic to come out in years.
So good it's unbeatable.
Exactly. That's why they called it that. Oh my god, I can't wait for them to butcher Squirrel Girl.
Oh, well, I know she was going to be in that New Warriors show, but because, that got cancelled, I don't know if they're ever going to do anything.
Either do it right or don't do it, simply put. Yeah, so this is kind of worrying in some sense because they've kind of talked about how this is going to be like your one-stop shop for everything DC related, like video uploads and... The one thing that did bother me was the mention of the word metaverse.
Yeah, it's one of those things DC, like everyone's going into this kind of stuff now.
I need to ask you this question. I guess we can throw it out to everyone else listening as well. Is like in regards to the idea and the concept and the buzzword of metaverse, has this essentially damaged popular media? Like in too great of a sense?
I mean, I would say so. I don't want constant digital platforms or any of that kind of stuff. It's horrible. And I hate that they use the term metaverse as well.
Yeah, because it's basically nostalgia bait.
Yeah.
Or to some extent, look at everything we own.
Yeah.
We've seen it way too many times with Disney and Wreck-It Ralph 2 and that god-awful Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers film, Space Jam 2.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Slam or whatever it was called. I can't remember what it was called.
No.
And that's the problem I find with this term metaverse, and even with like Marvel and like their Phase 4, and it'd be like, look at all the characters from the previous versions, and technically no one's dead.
You can just have them appear whenever.
Exactly. It feels like nothing is singular in some sense. Like I understand that everything's got to be a franchise, and almost every like Marvel and DC films like set up for 8 other films, which is fine if you're organized, you have a plan, the films are good, whatever. But I just like to see a standalone thing.
Just give me a film.
Give me a film. Yeah,
That's all I want.
It's very refreshing when you just see a film and you're just like, oh, that was nice.
Yeah. I watched The Last Duel recently. That was a good film.
The Lost what?
The Last Duel.
The Last Duel.
I think it was by Ridley Scott. I can't remember. That was really good.
Oh, I haven't heard that.
Yeah.
Personally, I'm not interested in anything Ridley Scott's doing, but as long as it's not Alien,
no,
whatever, he needs to stay well away from Alien.
Oh my God.
Take that away from that man, because when he starts bringing Jesus into this, I'm not a religious person, but leave that stuff out of Alien.
Well, the next one will be Alien vs Predator vs Jesus, right?
I hope not, because those Alien vs Predator films were awful. Everything after Aliens was just awful because they basically repeat the same stories. It's rip off Red Planet or whatever it's called.
Oh yeah.
Just stupid.
Just a film. That's all we need.
Yeah.
Like, do something good. People will watch it. If they like it, you can do more.
And then make your money and make something else. Exactly. And don't spend too much money on these things.
I mean, I will say maybe Disney needs to put a bit more money in because some of the CG is horrible at the moment.
Oh, yeah. I've seen that clip from Love and Thunder.
Oh, God. Oh, no.
You need to see some of the memes regarding that clip. But
I've kind of avoided as much because I actually just wanted to watch the film, but I might just watch...
I'll show you some after we do this discussion, I guess. But I am a bit bothered by this term, and I think it does seem like a move and a push to digital, which I'll give them props, is bold.
Yeah.
And I will give them that, but it does come across as like too big of a jump to some extent, especially if they're potentially saying goodbye to physical comics in some regards, which I think is the one thing people are looking at. Especially when you're swapping that out for an online subscription that you have no control over. You could potentially get comics and things shoved in your face.
Especially the 20th Batman comic or something. So I know there's a shitload of those that are digital.
It's too much Batman. And not everyone likes Batman, and DC needs to understand that. Now, I don't know if I'm necessarily going to speak on behalf, on your behalf, or whatever. But before anyone comes at us with like the get with the times, old man, I think it's worth mentioning that, at least with Marvel and DC comics, they don't sell that well nowadays.
No, they mostly make their money from films and merch.
As much as Marvel and DC won't admit it, or tell you, manga outsells comics.
Oh yeah.
Films, like you said, outsells them, and I believe some independent comics do sell more copies than Marvel and DC, which is interesting. So saying that everything has to be digital in order to save the company or as a new solution is not going to cut it. This is not a one-stop fix.
Yeah.
If DC thinks that this is going to make them profitable or that side of their company, thrive, it's not going to, because to some extent, the issue is more with the comics as a whole. People clearly read books.
Yes.
People clearly buy books. It's not a matter of books are going out of fashion and dying, because I can bring you up numbers to show that Saga has done really well, stuff like that, or other comics. People are buying that, people are reading that, people are talking about that. And it didn't need a film to get to that section. Word of mouth.
Like, another reason why manga ends up outselling is its format and the fact that it's got a consistent writer just telling a story.
It's a one and done story.
Yeah.
It's an argument that me and a couple friends, Ferret and Obsidian, have had tons of times going to the comic book shops of comic versus manga.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, newer audiences, do kind of get confused when you go to a comic book shop and you're like, I want to read Batman, and it's like, which of the 8 Batman comics do I read?
And which of the 30 different authors do you want to see?
Yeah, and I mean, this is no discredit to anyone who works at comic book shops, but when a comic book owner does have that knowledge and be like, oh, it's really good, Batman does this one thing and that, and if you want something more like this, you got the Batman from this story, I got the copy of that, it can be a bit overwhelming.
Yeah.
No disrespect to comic book owners. I think you guys do a great job and your knowledge is very valuable. We need people like you.
That's why most people just get recommended, all right, here's Dark Knight Returns, here's Killing Joke.
Yeah. You're done.
Yeah.
You're done. Other than, like, I think Arkham Asylum is pretty good as well, because the artwork is fantastic in that comic. Yeah, I mean, there's other issues. Like, I mean, maybe people are just kind of sick of, like, the superhero formats in the paper form. Maybe people just want, like, TV shows and films instead. And maybe, like, the pandering to, like, the Twitter audience probably hasn't helped when they do kind of really stupid things. Like, I'm not one of these people who is like, oh, superhero can't be this or can't be that.
Yeah.
I don't really care as long as that's not the point of the comic.
Yeah, just tell a good story.
If you want to make... I know the one thing that got a lot of people upset or people talking was, like, them making a younger version of Superman gay, which doesn't bother me. But
is that Superboy or... Like,
always Superboy, or I may have misspoken. That's fine. I don't really care about that. But here's the thing... If that's not a good story, I'm not going to read it.
Yeah, exactly.
And people on Twitter championing that are not going to read it.
Yeah.
Because they don't read comics. They just want to see what they like in their face again. That's basically Twitter in a lot of regards. And I mean, sometimes... Not sometimes. Well, this is probably given some people, maybe hardcore fans and new audience, a bad taste in their mouth, thinking that maybe they've been betrayed and stuff. I'm not one of those... arsehole people who are like, comics have to stay the same. I remember my Batman being like this. I don't give a fuck. Those people can fuck off as far as I'm concerned. Because you're all, they're unfortunately almost always white Americans who always want to tell you how this race and that person and this culture and this and that is ruining their comics. And I'm just like, oh, read your dusty ass comics.
The ones who are still dreaming of prelapsarian America. Yeah,
those kinds of people. We are not promoting those people, and I'm not those. Neither of us are those kinds of people. We are here for the stories. We're here for the art.
Yeah, like, give me as many comics that's full of, like, gay people, trans people. Just good writing is what I need. It's why I love Saga.
Yeah, good writing, and I think this is a problem which, once again, can be another discussion which maybe we can talk upon. There is a problem in terms of writing characters like that, and I think in comics, it sometimes does it the worst, where they will have a character that is gay, transgendered, black, this race, whatever, and that's the point of the character.
Yeah.
The character has no character, they are just that
You're just making them
thing,
a token.
A token, which I would imagine we should have moved past that. When South Park can make fun of that and have a character literally called Token and be the only black kid character, we should have moved past that. We should have learned from that.
They actually did a really funny joke about that in a recent episode.
Oh, okay.
Where that's not his actual name. It's Tolkien, like J.R.R. Tolkien.
Oh, okay, that's even better.
And everyone's been saying it wrong and, like, being kind of racist.
Okay, that's funny. Yeah. Is it much like the same episode when Randy uses the N-word?
Oh.
And I think obviously that causes a lot of issues. And I think that the whole the way they resolve it was just the fact of Tolkien basically saying, you don't get it, and he's like, now I get it, now you get it, or probably one of my favorite jokes that kind of references that is the episode where they go to like set the whale free.
Oh yeah.
And like all the boys sneak into, I think it's SeaWorld, and like they all have like their faces painted black, but Tolkien has his painted white. That is such a brilliant joke on so many bloody levels.
It was very funny.
But like, people honestly could just be tired of like these stories and these characters, and they want something new and they want something fresh. And I mean, and maybe they're getting that elsewhere, and that's maybe why DC feels they have to do this, because I mean, in the form of comics and visual media, it doesn't look too good for DC in some sense. And I think when you look at things, the two best examples I can think of, which might be kind of spelling the end of Marvel and DC, not that I'm saying it's going to collapse or whatever, it is going to eventually, given the rate they're going. When you look at things like Invincible and The Boys, they have become so popular and so well regarded, and it's not just because they're good shows.
Yep. It's something different. They're new.
It's
they
something
feel refreshing.
Different. I mean, everyone knows the meme from Invincibles.
Oh, yeah.
Marvel and DC can only hope to wish to have that level of fame and just notoriety.
Yep.
When was the last time a Marvel film had a meme that strong?
I honestly can't remember. I mean, the one that always comes to my head would be from 2008, and that'd be he built it with a box of scraps in a cave.
That's from Iron Man, isn't
it?
Yep. Okay. But that Iron Man film is good, though.
Oh, yeah.
But,
but come on, that's 14 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, they're good shows, and I think people need to realize that, and I think that's probably what's going to happen, is Marvel and DC are probably going to really struggle in the next coming years to kind of fight off. Even just saw an article regarding Invincible where I think someone referred to Invincible as Marvel and DC's rival.
Oh, yeah.
Which was quite interesting words, because it technically is. I mean, they could expand that to be something bigger.
Yep.
Not just a series. Even The Boys has an animated anthology series now.
Yeah.
Diabolical, which I still need to watch. I still need to watch The Boys regardless.
It's really good.
But, and there's other things like comics in the works. I know they're doing the G-Men. I think it's getting... I think Amazon has confirmed G-Men is going to be a series, which is the X-Men parody.
Yeah.
Curious. Done by the same guy who did The Boys. I can't remember his name right now.
Garth Ennis.
Garth, yes. Yeah. And even, I know Sandman, I don't care about the live-action Sandman version, but...
If it gets people to read the comics...
and if it's something different based on a comic, that's fine, because one of my favourite illustrators of all time did the first few runs of Sandman. I can't remember his name, but went on to do the Max.
Oh, yes.
Can't remember his name.
It's not Dave Mazzucchelli. No.
I can't remember his name.
He did some Batman, yeah.
He did do some Batman, yes.
Oh, maybe it is Dave
I think
Mazzucchelli
he did do some
then.
Batman. Because he did that really kind of like hulking, like kind of like Hulk-ish Batman.
It might be him then.
And he's done some Wolverine covers as well.
Yeah, it might be him.
Yeah, maybe we'll get some more stuff with that, like another animated Max TV show. That would be some stuff. Although the MTV animated series is fine as it is.
Yeah,
I like that show. But maybe that's what's going to happen, is we're going to see this, and maybe we are seeing the downfall of like DC to some extent.
Yeah, or at least they're just going to become more generic and insular, which
is not good. Would you say they're becoming that or like that right now?
I mean, a lot of their products have just been what everyone's doing with multiverse stuff, of everything's just, here's another version of blah blah.
Well,
and I don't like that.
Would it be fair to say that the last cool thing that DC did was the Court of the Night Owls?
I mean, I'd say I'm still a big fan of Heroes in Crisis, which everyone else hates, because it did something different.
I don't know what that is.
Basically, superheroes go to therapy, and it was really good.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
I actually kind of like that concept.
Yeah.
It wasn't like that concept with like I'm not even going to get into it because I can't remember what it's called. But I'll tell you after. But yeah, I mean, I guess the only other final question to ask is like, is this basically DC without the C? You know, the comics now?
Yeah.
Like, can they even technically be called Detective Comics at this point?
I'm surprised they haven't changed their name, because it doesn't feel like they care about comics much. It's just like, okay, we're just going to hire this one. He seems popular. There we go.
Unfortunately, it does seem like the joke that Red Letter Media made a couple of years ago is coming true, in that the joke being that's what DC stands for, don't care.
Yeah, that's very true.
It does feel like that, and I know the cinematic universe is just in a state.
Oh god, we can't even mention the Flash stuff. Fucking hell.
Yeah, I can't even talk about it in the podcast because it is ever changing.
Yeah, that's a saga on its own.
That's a discussion. That's a discussion. Anything else you want to add to this discussion before I hand it back to Future Raccoon?
There was one thing, I think I remember seeing somewhere that when they were mentioning about the animated products that they'd be doing, that they're going to rely on known franchises like Hanna-Barbera. I was like, how well known is Hanna-Barbera nowadays?
Most people know Hanna-Barbera as just it being Scooby-Doo.
Exactly.
There is a lot of stuff. You've got Flintstones, Jetsons. Yeah. They can do some great stuff. Like I know they did the crossover comics where they did, like Harley Quinn was with the Looney Tunes and stuff, and then they did like Scooby-Doo Apocalypse.
Yeah.
That would make a fantastic animated show. They did like another Flintstone series. They did the Snagglepuss series, which was actually good because it actually dealt with Snagglepuss actually being a gay character, kind of fighting for justice within the justice system itself.
Yeah.
And Wacky Racers meets Mad Max.
I remember that one.
If they did stuff like that and they put a shit ton of money into it, that could work.
But would they? I feel like they're just going to play it safe, because if they're already saying we're just going to rely on known franchises, do you think they're going to go for the weirder subset of those franchises?
Well, I could throw the argument in of Jellystone, which was a series that took every single Hanna-Barbera, or as many Hanna-Barbera cartoons, put them in a town and just did wacky, crazy shenanigans.
That's true. That could work.
Whether we'll see anything crazier and further than that, I don't know, because Scooby-Doo, as much as they've done so many iterations of it, and I know they've just confirmed another version of it yet again, if they were to do something like Mystery Incorporated, which was a more episodic, like story-driven one, which the monsters were actually real in that one.
I remember.
And just kind of like push it. Because one thing I know a lot of people I've seen, like on the internet, really hype up for is an actual scary, horror-based Scooby-Doo show.
Oh,
something that's actually frightening. And if DC Warner Brothers was to go that direction, that could be something that really gets people talking, because, I mean, it's not as if people don't know what Scooby-Doo is. And they're not exactly, drawing too many obscure characters. Although I do know that in the Scoob movie that came out a couple of years ago, they did have that robot dog character who's a very lesser known Dinomutt, I think is what he was called.
I was thinking it was something like Robomutt, so Dinomutt.
It's either Dinomutt or Robomutt, and the very Batman-esque character, they were in that film. So, because I think that film was meant to be a cinematic universe, but it kind of fell through last minute. And it just kind of became a Scooby-Doo film with a cameo from Dick Dastardly.
Oh, yeah,
who was the main villain, which that's a cool idea, because I think he was meant to be like the main villain, meant to be the Thanos of the Scoob or Hanna-Barbera cinematic universe. Who, to be honest, he's not that bad of a villain. Yeah, the HBCU, copyrighted and panned. 2020, the Ferret and Raccoon podcast, Ace and Raccoon. DC, you have to pay us royalties if you want to use that.
It's gone as well as the Universal Monsters universe.
Oh yeah, or as I coined it, the when they were doing the Stephen King stories, I called it the Steven Universe.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
But yeah, I don't know. That is an interesting thing, because they need to be experimental. Like the newest adaptation of the Looney Tunes, I think it was just called Looney Tunes Cartoons or something like that. They had some stuff in it.
Oh, okay.
People actually animated that really well, and I don't know. It is hard to say, because Hanna-Barbera has a really interesting wealth, and you could do so many things with that. Like, you could just start bringing characters back. Like, you could do a series with Captain Caveman. It's bizarre, or you could do a series with Josie and the Pussycats. Yeah. Like a musical series or something like that. I
know they probably won't, because with the whole Riverdale stuff.
They're technically connected.
Yeah, and they were going to do a live action show for that, but that got cancelled. I think
probably for the best, given the state of Riverdale. probably best. Maybe just stick to animation when it comes to Hanna-Barbera, because I don't think it's going to work very well in live action, which is a bit of a shame. But it is tricky. I don't know. Like, the problem, I think that kind of comes back to the biggest problem with DC is they have a really good hand that they can deal, and they're just not dealing it.
No, creativity doesn't want to live there anymore.
Because I can guarantee you this: if I was working for DC and if I was the head of that animation department, within 10 years I would be whooping Disney's ass in terms of animation. Not that I'm saying I'm going to run a tight shift or anything. I'm just saying, like, my ideas, the creativity, even just me mentioning that horror-based Scooby-Doo series.
Yeah, so much better.
That'd be some good stuff. You get the right people. I mean, you know, they need to figure some things out, because all DC and Marvel needs is another independent series to get another really good live-action show, and people are going to start coming away from that Marvel stuff. It's bad enough that Phase 4 has been so lackluster.
Oh my god. I think the best part has been Hawkeye for me. Maybe then WandaVision.
Yeah, and even then, Doctor Strange 2 has kind of destroyed WandaVision.
God, that was a mess.
Yeah, but we'll see. I mean, we'll see at the end of the day. We just have to wait and be patient. At the end of the day, we still have our comic books on our shelves.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, hopefully they're still going to release physical media. If not, I can always download it, and that's something DC needs to remember. As long as you put it on the streaming service, I will always have it on my external hard drive.
I've got a black flag with a skull on it.
Yes.
You can't stop that.
As much as they want to, they really can't. But hopefully, we don't necessarily endorse piracy, but hopefully it doesn't come to that. To be fair, DC and Marvel have been somewhat good when it comes to releasing physical media. I will give them that. Marvel always releases their stuff. Same with Disney, same with DC. All those straight-to-DVD films do come out on DVD. They might not be around forever, but they're there if you want to get them. So, unlike Netflix, they do a better job than them, because barely anything that Netflix owns is ever on DVD. Just off the top of my head, BoJack Horseman Season 1 and 2, Daredevil, I think Season 1 and 2, Black Mirror Seasons 1 to 4.
I don't think Glow's on DVD either.
Nope.
It's annoying. And I know it's not a good film necessarily, but I wanted to get it for my mom, the Eurovision film, and that came out years ago, still not out.
No, I don't think it is, no.
It's ridiculous.
Hopefully when they get liquefied, someone buys up this stuff and actually releases it, and actually, you know, has a big brain moment and goes, hey, you know what, we can make even more money if we release it on DVD. Because...
Wait, we've got it streaming, and we can also DVD... Oh... Money? Where?
They're such a paranoid company, and it's just pathetic. But yeah, anything else you want to add to this discussion?
I think that's all. My brain's kind of exploded from this.
Fair enough. It's understandable. It is it's kind of a minefield regarding this situation. But Ace, I want to thank you for being on this discussion.
Thank you for having me back.
It's been a pleasure to have you on here. Hopefully we'll hear from you very, very soon on the next few podcasts. And yeah, I guess I'll hand it back to Future Raccoon. All right, thank you, Past Raccoon. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed that discussion. I know it was one where we kind of went off the roads a little bit to some extent, but yeah, I thought it was something that was big enough to warrant a discussion, and obviously I had to bring in Ace because he's pretty much a expert when it comes to DC Comics. His knowledge is somewhat endless for the most part, unlike me. But yeah, that's pretty much going to wrap up the podcast for the most part. The only thing I have left is the video of the episode, which is going to link back to the discussion, and that's going to be the Rise and Fall of Warner Brothers Studios store. This is an interesting video from Hats Off Studio, essentially talking about the mega stores they used to have, which I do remember because I do remember going to one of them and actually buying a really cool Sylvester and Tweety mug, which eventually got broken. But yeah, I'm not a fan of the whole tagline of the rise and fall. I think it's very redundant and overplayed, but I think Hats Off Media, or Entertainment, has done a really good job kind of a blast from the past and kind of talking about the benefits of this store and how it's not really around anymore and what was really great about it, and kind of linking back to Warner Brothers as a company and some of the things that have happened to them and done. So it's relevant, but hopefully a lot of you guys will find it entertaining and probably informative to some extent, as I imagine some of you've probably never heard of this, but hey. But yeah, that's pretty much going to wrap up this podcast for the most part. I was the Angry Raccoon, and I will see you on the next podcast.